Claudia Monpere, welcome to Writers in Relationship.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
It's really great to meet you. I have to say, I adore your story in Hodgepodge 5.1. And I reread it again for like the fifth time in preparation for this interview. And it is the most sensual, like, this world that you created is such a delight and so sort of like it's edgy and warm at the same, like, I don't even know how you did it. It was just so, I just feel so proud to, I mean, it's funny, I wrote under a pen name for this issue, but I'm very proud that my story is alongside yours. I just found it magical in the true sense of the word. So I just wanted to start with that and say thank you because
Oh, thank you. That's so meaningful to me. I pretty much write only Flash these days, and somehow I thought that I was being asked to write a Flash piece. And when I realized I needed to write something longer, I kind of panicked. But then once I was into it, it was really fun.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. We off camera we were talking about how sometimes mistakes are like where the juice are in life, and I don't maybe that's like an example.
Yeah, it would not have been that story if I was trying to keep it under 1,000 words. So I'm so glad you all wanted something longer.
It's great. So I love origin stories, and this is a joint production between Hodgepodge and Writers in Relationship, which is my personal podcast. But I'm always interested in the intersection between writing and relating, and I'm really obsessed with origin stories. So I always want to know, like, how did it all start? So tell us about how you and you and I just we just met recently. So tell us how you first encountered Hodgepodge and what made you decide you wanted to get involved.
Well, completely out of the blue, I've been involved with Smoke Long quarterly with their different writing workshops, fitness, Smoke Long Summer for 3 or 4 years. And Pam Tournier, am I saying her name correctly? She and I were in the same group in a smoke long workshop, and she reached out to me and she asked if I'd be willing to submit a story. And I didn't know your gorgeous magazine then. And so I went online and read some back issues and I just fell in love with it. And then I really, really wanted to make sure that I could write a story that would, that would work for you guys. And it was so fun to look at the art and to choose a piece and to have no idea where I was going to go with it at first.
That was a hard one too, your image with the carrot. I mean, it was funny because I when I first read your story, I was not looking at the image and I was like, the character that has an X for a face, where did she get that's so creative. And then when I looked at the image, I'm like, oh, it's in the image. I didn't know that at first. Like, that's so cool that that was what stirred that character came directly from Emma's painting.
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to do something interesting with the X's. And I was like thinking, well, why do some of the women have X's and but not all of them? I knew at the beginning I wanted to do something with the X's, and I knew at the beginning I wanted it to be first person plural. I love writing we. I just love writing in the voice of we. And I knew that this was going to be a tightly knit community of women. But that's kind of all I knew when I first started writing, and it was both scary and thrilling to try to figure out what the heck would happen with the X's. And I also, looking at that painting, for some reason, I immediately thought of the woman dressed in brown. I immediately named her Mother Brown, and I immediately named her older. I made her older than all the other women. Um, and then the idea of her being pregnant and having a baby with an X, that came to me pretty quickly. And then the tulip in the painting, I just thought, oh, maybe these women harvest light tulips. And so there were some ideas that came to me pretty quickly generated by the painting. And then other ideas, as I wrote, they kind of came to me. It was such a fun story to write. It makes me think that I definitely want to write some more that are longer than Flash.
That's thrilling. It's so exciting to hear. Yeah, the process stuff is it's such a mystery to me, like how we get from here to here. And It's fun
It,
to just hear a little bit more about that. Let me back it up a little. I'm also really interested in setting. So maybe you can just tell us where you are, and maybe how, if this resonates, where you are impacts what you write about.
yeah, I live in Kensington, California, and Kensington is in the Bay Area, and it's got a more rural feeling than a lot of the Bay Area. I've got coyotes and wild turkeys. I see turkeys almost every day, and lots of trees, redwoods and oaks, madrones. And so, and I only have to walk for 10 minutes and I'm at a coffee shop. So I feel like I get kind of the both best of both worlds. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm like 20 minutes from UC Berkeley, 25 minutes from UC Berkeley. So there's kind of a lively cultural scene. I would say that the natural world is deeply important to me, and every day I am so grateful that I look out my window and I see trees and I see clouds. And so this story I knew would be grounded in some way in the natural world. And I'm really deeply concerned about climate change. And so I knew that I wanted this story to be set in a future when the world was very, very hot and when traditional governments had kind of collapsed. And in my sense, this was a community where people lived in small communities and traded with one another. Um, and yeah, that's
That was when you were describing the turkey, I was like, oh yeah, that's her story. That's
Yeah.
like the
And you
world
know
of
what's so
movies.
funny is I really wanted to put moose in this story because I become really close friends with some folks that I met at a Kathy Fish, Nancy Stolman workshop in Colorado. And the four of us are really close friends, and we got obsessed with moose because I didn't know them going into the workshop, but one of them actually saw a moose in the wild, and nobody else at that workshop did. And so after the workshop, the four of us kind of came together and decided we liked each other and we wanted to meet regularly and talk about our stories. And we were trying to decide what to name our group when we finally came up with Moose Talk. And so we're always doing these silly little moose jokes with each other. And so I like when I had the idea that Mother Brown's baby, that the X would open and the quadrants would birth uh, animals. I had a baby moose at first, and I was all on board with the moose. And then I realized, wait a minute, they're living in this really hot time. There are no forests. Moose can't thrive there. And so then I was so disappointed, and I thought, well, what animals do I want? And so then I went down a long rabbit hole figuring out what animals I should have, and came up with the idea of goats. But so the natural world is deeply, deeply important to me. It infuses all of my writing in some way.
I just want to pick up a little bit on what you said about climate change. I don't really know how not to let what's happening politically influence what I make art about. Like it just feels like how could it not? And yet there's a lot of people that don't relate to that. And I would just like to hear a little bit more about that. Like how does that
Oh,
how do you let it come into your world? How do you not let it eat your work up? Like I don't know anything about that. It's just it feels very pressing to me. You know, that the Supreme Court decision that just came down yesterday has me utterly devastated and not knowing what to do. And I sort of like, do I write a song? Do I just go back and do more work in my indivisible? Like it's just hard to know how to be a humane human in this moment, let alone
that's
an
that,
artist.
that's such a great question. I think about that all the time. And some of my work in early drafts is too preachy because I'm just like I had a story workshop recently with a group where I kept referring to the orange one. And they said, well, the story is great if you could just take out the orange one because we know who that is and we know, and it just doesn't really fit. So it's really challenging. I mean, I think for me, just the act of creating art is kind of a rebellion. It's clear that this administration sees everything in terms of commerce and power. And so when we create art because we want to enter our imaginations and we want to share it with others and not get rich, to me, that's a tiny little form of rebellion. And I think I'm like just exploring lots of tiny ways that I can address the awful things going on through my stories. And so like I had the rule in this story about books, that books were limited. The only books that the women could read were the ones that had these very practical applications about, raising goats and raising tulip. I'm sorry, not goats, but raising tulips. I mean, because you look at all the books that are banned, you look at all the threats on universities under this administration. And so that was one little thing that I was trying to explore. And I've written quite a few stories about the threats to women's body, the attempt to take control over our reproduction. I have a story that came out just recently in Fictive Dream called Ultrasound Q&A, where women who are pregnant are brought in mass groups, and their fetuses are supposedly asked questions about how godly the mother is. And then on the screens, the texts decide whether or not the baby's movements are answering correctly. And it was a really horrifying story to write, but it just felt like we weren't that far away. And so I kind of alternate. I mean, that's a really horrifying story, but I alternate between just going deep into the awfulness of it and trying to create hope and resilience, because I believe so strongly that the only way we can cope as humans, the only way we can get out of bed every morning is if we have a sense that the day can bring us something and that we can contribute something to the day. And I think that tiny little encounters with strangers that can bring us together in a tiny little way, I think I'm really big on those. Like if someone is impatient, a clerk's impatient, and then suddenly something happens and they treat me kindly, or I'm able to do something similar with someone. There was a woman the other day with her baby, and she had no money, and she had a sign out, and I asked her if she was hungry, and she said yes, and I went and bought her a pizza down the street and gave her some money too, and it was I think probably good for her, and it was lovely for me. I don't understand why people in this administration don't get the that when we give, when we think of people other than ourselves, when we have a whole global community in our head and feel honor bound to help serve them, that doesn't just help other people, that helps us.
Yeah, it's so true. I think there's a stuntedness in that perspective of like just selfishness, like that selfishness is somehow good for the selfish person, and it's not. Like it feels terrible.
Right, right.
Ultimately, we're separated from everyone versus when I have enough and I share, like I feel better. Like it's just what you were saying.
Yeah, yeah. It's
And
a
and
narrow, unhappy way of living.
and I think art and writing, there is an inherently generous. I mean, even writing, we're often writers are introverts, and we're sort of alone, and I just don't buy that, because at the very, very, very minimum, I'm writing for someone else to read, and it's
Yeah,
a connection, it's a relationship. Like that's the core. I mean, there's some people that just keep journals, but to me, that's a very different thing. My practice is to communicate with another human being. And you can take, you can have critique groups or your moose group. There's all kinds of ways to connect in writing.
Yeah. Well, and don't you love when people take things away from your writing that maybe you didn't see or you hadn't
Oh,
intended?
yes, thrilling,
It's, it's the
thrilling.
best.
It's totally great. It's totally great. Yeah, yeah. So the upliftingness, and I think oftentimes that there'll be this sort of hesitancy to shy away from politics, but I think it's like I feel like I want to go in the other direction. I want to go more into it and go deeper and to explore it and to see what new ideas we can come up with because I think that's how we dream our new world into existence in part.
Oh, I think that's so true. I think it's tempting to either be scared of it or to worry that we're going to go off onto a diatribe. And we could do that, and then we can just revise later and get rid of the orange man.
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna go. So you were telling me you have a book, and is this your first book?
This is my very first
Oh, I want
book.
to. Can you tell us about this?
Sure. It's called The Periodic Family, and it's coming out with Cowboy Jamboree in October. And the book wouldn't exist without the amazing Matt Kendrick, who is a really talented editor and writer and mentor in the UK. And I worked with him on organizing the book. I had no idea which stories to put in and which ones to leave out and what the title should be. And he just did an incredible job at reading way too many stories and helping me see the themes and kind of put them together. And so it's called The Periodic Family, and it deals with families that are struggling. And some of them are struggling in really bleak, scary ways, having to do with addiction or abuse. Some of them are struggling in more typical ways, mother-daughter relationships. Some of the stories, there was an editor who turned the collection down and said it was just too bleak. And then in these times, she just didn't want to accept a collection like that. And so I changed the last few stories in the collection to have some that were more hopeful. And I actually wrote a couple new stories. I've been trying so hard to not make my writing too bleak. I think readers can get bleakness in small doses, at least some can. But uh, so Yeah, it was just a joy, an absolute joy to write. And I was obsessed with whether or not I could put together a collection that had a combination of speculative and realism. They're all flash. It's a collection of flash. And at AWP, I like queried every single editor I knew there and said, "What do you think?" And the vast majority of them said, "Yeah, it's just fine to combine speculative and realism." There's a lot of science in the manuscript. I'm terrible at science and math, terrible, terrible, terrible. But I took a really cool workshop with Ingrid, and I will massacre her last name. It starts with a J. And she has a background in physics, and she's also a fiction writer. And the workshop was on incorporating math and science into your writing. And so I just went on a deep dive into chemistry and biology and um, different kinds of math that where I couldn't really understand the concepts, but I could get some of the language. And so I'm super excited about the way that I was able to infuse elements from the periodic table into the collection, math theorems that I don't understand. So I would say probably maybe 10% of the stories in there have some kind of references to math or science. So that was an exciting thing for me. And relationships. I tried really hard to have lots and lots of different relationships. So you've got, um, grandparents and grandchildren. You've got mother, daughter, father, daughter. There's a lot of, maybe not a lot of mental illness, but there's a good chunk of mental illness in it. My mother, my brother both suffered from serious mental illnesses. My husband And so that's a theme that's always kind of gnawing at me. Um, but there's a lot of joy in it too, I think. I remember a story that's in there that I wrote called "She Wants More Joy." Let's see, I forget the title, but the first line is "She wants more joy in her life, so she changes her name to Peaches." And I wrote it um, at a workshop in New Mexico, Robert's Bending Genres workshop, and I had just had some really awful news around mental health issues with my family. And I almost thought I arrived at the workshop and I almost thought, no, I have to just leave and go home. But I stayed and I just thought, damn it, I'm so tired of writing bleak shit. I just want to write something joyful. And so I kind of envisioned a woman who changed her name to Peaches. And I just, that story makes me so happy whenever I read it.
That's like such a great first line. It's
Thank
so
you.
it's funny, but it's poignant and it's like so many things in a very few words.
Thank you.
Lovely. Lovely. Um, when did you start writing? Tell us a little bit about your relationship with
I
writing.
was the oldest of six children, and with a ill mom who was in and out of hospitals, I was given lots and lots of parenting responsibilities. And I found that one way that I could kind of parent was by making up intriguing stories for the little ones. And so I would make up fairy tales. Sometimes I'd write them down and read them to them, and other times I just do them in my head. But they really loved the horror stories that I would make up. And I'll never forget that I told them that the reason that Taco Bell and McDonald's were so quick is because they had children that they ground up in the into the meat and they love that story. They love that one. So anyway, lots of fairy tales and horror stories for the little ones in my family. And then when I got into like high school and college, I wrote poetry, mostly poetry, but also plays. I was a theater arts major. And yes, I wrote plays. And then I once I had kids, it was really hard to write. It just was, and also I was in this difficult marriage, and so I just remember many late nights where I would be, oh my gosh, I remember being on a vacation with my family, and we were in this cabin, and everybody was asleep, and I remember sitting by the fire at 3 a.m. writing. So just like stealing little bits of time to write. And then I had this wonderful job at Santa Clara University where I taught mostly freshman comp, but I really wanted to be able to teach creative writing. And the university was really gracious. They gave me time off and I went and got an MFA. So that was an amazing experience. I entered as a poet and loved my poetry classes, but there was one semester when I couldn't find a poetry class that would fit the childcare arrangements I had for my children. And so I took a fiction workshop. Oh my God. First of all, I really only knew how to write dialogue. I just had never written stories before. I had written plays and poems. And so the professor took me aside and very kindly said, "Dear, you might want to drop this class and take a playwriting class." And I said, "Well, I can't. The playwriting won't fit with my childcare schedule. I have to stay in this class." And so I just went on a deep dive reading every short story writer I could. I read Tobias Wolff and Chekhov and Monroe and I kind of taught myself how to write a short story. And then I'll never forget this one guy in the class, a very young man, and I think I was like in my 40s then, and I remember his response in workshop to a story I'd written was, "Well, who cares what a middle-aged mother has to say?" Because the protagonist was. And that's my only memory. I'm sure people in the workshop defended me or said, what an inappropriate thing to say, something like that. But I felt Yeah, it was a really awful feeling. But I really fell in love with writing fiction then. And although my thesis was all poetry, when I left, I realized that my big love was storytelling. And I had so much more success in getting things published with my short stories than with my poetry. Um, and I actually wrote a novel. Well, what one thing happened that affected my writing life profoundly, and that's that my husband took his life um, when my kids were 10 and 15. Um, and so kind of everything in my life focused on their well-being and us trying to heal. And and then the insurance company wouldn't pay the life insurance because he had jumped off a bridge and they had this theory that it was all a ruse, because his body wasn't found. So I was followed around by a private detective for quite a while. It was just nuts. It was like not real. It was so like everything seemed one-dimensional in my life. Like I would look at a canyon setting. We lived in the Oakland Hills and it just all seemed beige and one-dimensional. It was like I honestly don't know how the heck I got through that time, but I did, uh, and my writing got really really bleak. I wrote mostly in journals. Um, yeah, mostly in journals, and then when I began writing poetry, it was all really grounded in my husband's depression and his death, and I don't really know what it just sort of gradually I began exploring other subjects. The natural world has always been such solace to me, and I just made a real effort to continue the things I love, like hiking and kayaking. And the years went by, and I ended up writing a novel, and the novel had a character similar to my husband, but everything in the novel, the plot, everything was really, really different. And I got this really wonderful agent and got some great responses from um, publishers, none of whom wanted to publish it, but said lovely things about it. And my agent was really encouraging. And then one day when I was going to go on a vacation, or maybe I was on vacation. She called me and she said, "Oh my God, I think we have a contract. You need to come home early so we can, I don't remember, have a Zoom or something." But so I remember driving home early from the vacation, and then I got this call from her, and she said, "I hope you haven't left yet to come home." I said, "Well, yeah, what's the deal?" And she said, "Well, the director of marketing decided ultimately that your novel's going to be too hard to market because it's just so sad." Um, and and then my agent suggested I send it to some small presses. She didn't do that kind of thing, and I just never did. So the novel just got put aside. But I was really sad, and then I decided I was going to write another novel and I was going to make sure that it wasn't too sad. And so then as I was working on it, I hired like a mentor slash developmental editor. And the thing is that she knew what had happened with the first novel draft. And so I think she was really trying to steer me away from literary fiction, which is really what I write and what I wanted to write. And so I worked with her for a year, and she always had these ideas that I would blindly take. And I realized after a year, I didn't like what the novel was becoming. It wasn't what I wanted to be writing about. Um, so summer was coming up, and I was talking to my therapist, and she said, "Well, you've got summer coming up soon. How are you feeling about it?" And I said, "Well, actually, really sad because it'll mean I'll have to get back to that damn novel." And she said, "Well, I know you've told me how much joy writing gives you. Like, when is the last time that you got joy from writing?" And I remembered it was when I wrote a piece that got published in Smoke Lung Quarterly. And I didn't even really know the genre of flash, but I wrote this piece and it ended up getting accepted, and I didn't even really know much about Smoke Long other than someone said maybe you should send it there. And and she said, "Well, can you do more flash writing like that?" And I said, "Oh, well, interestingly, Smoke Long has this thing called the Smoke Long Summer." So that, Gail, that was like that changed my whole writing life. That Smoke Long Summer, it really did. I did Smoke Long Summer, did workshops, learned more about the genre of flash, and I've just never looked back. I've been involved with Smoke Long ever since then, and I think it's been four years now. So yeah, I just adore the genre of flash, the way that you can pick up the lyricism from poetry, the way you can experiment because it's so short. So yeah, that's kind of my writing journey in a nutshell, in a big nutshell.
It's really interesting to me that shifting genres elicited the joy and brought the joy into or back. So that's interesting to me.
That's such a great observation. Wow, Gail, I never thought about that. Whoa, I never thought about that, that shifting genres did that. I
But
wonder
it
if
makes sense to me. It makes sense to me because I think a long-term project like a novel is going to be just by its nature more intense and deep. Not that Flash can't be, but
yeah,
I think there is a conduciveness to levity or
yeah,
sparks or spring-like energy and Flash that it feels easier to get there through. I don't know, for me.
yeah. That's a great observation. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's really fun to hear that, just to see that trajectory. And I'm very happy you're finding both. I mean, even just in that one story, I've read some of your other pieces, but I love the intensity and the dark. I have a lot of that in my history as well. So I relate to that and I feel like that's an important aspect of being human. I would never not want to have that in my reading
Yeah.
experience. And the lightness is also such a beautiful part of being human, and I love that in writing too. So
Oh gosh, we got to have both, huh?
yeah,
We've
I
got to have
agree.
both in our lives,
Yes,
and
yes,
some pieces stay in the dark, and some are all light the whole time. But the writing that the reading I really love, and the writing I try to do, kind of combines those two.
ditto. Yeah, for
Oh,
sure, for sure. One quick question before we wrap. So you've worked with editors, it sounds like, and
yeah.
agents, and I'm always, always, always curious about what are the ingredients that make that really synergistic relationship where the editing is pulling the writer into their own voice and to really evolve, as opposed to what you described where that editor was actually pulling you in a direction that wasn't your direction. What makes a good relationship with an editor is what I'm asking.
I think mutual respect and healthy communication that involves listening and asking questions. Um, I've actually never had an awful experience with an editor. I've had amazing experiences and solidly good experiences. Split Lip, I had the most amazing experience with them. They accepted my piece, but they wanted some of the metaphors to be tightened. And it was so fun working with them on things that I could do to make the piece stronger. Um, but they would pose things as questions rather than like admonitions. And so I think that um, ability to kind of listen to each other and know that we're all professionals. And I think patience is important too. So I feel lucky that I've only had, good experiences with editors, and same with my agent. It was all um, yeah, it was all really good. I just think the mutual respect and healthy communication for me are the big things.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the specificity of like when it's a question, it lands different and it's evocative of being of generating more,
Yeah.
right? Like trying
It's like the feeling that you're a team.
Right.
It's not a hierarchy. It's two people, or maybe there's three editors involved or whatever, but everybody has the same goal to make the piece shine. And then the question is how best can we get there? And I think if you realize that you're all professionals, everybody has something to bring, then it falls into place beautifully.
Yeah, I remember somebody saying to me once, this is the first time I felt like we were both on the same side.
Oh, I
And
love
that
that.
was it's a version of what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
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 that's the idea. That's
yeah.
great. Yeah, thanks. So just the last question, if you had one piece of advice, most of my audience is other writers. What piece of advice would you give to people listening who are writers?
Oh. So okay, to writers, I'd say be patient and kind to yourself. Um, I'd say recognize that for the vast majority of us, we come up with drafts that are like Anne Lamott's shitty first drafts, and that a real magic happens if we keep plugging away. And I'd say don't get down by rejections. That's just a part of the writing life if you want to submit. But I guess the biggest piece of advice I would say is find your community. Find people who you like and trust and who are committed to writing to the same degree that you are. Some people are fiercely devoted to writing, and some people like to do it and like to get together and talk about it, but not to the same degree. And I think finding people who have the same level of commitment and whose writing you like and whose personalities you like. It's so important to have trust in writing groups. So I'd say for me, that's the biggest thing. I've had different writing communities over the decades, and I think I would absolutely not be writing the way I am now if I hadn't had that.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And I'm so excited to read your book. So excited.
Thank
And just
you.
do one more plug for it, just so we all know where and when and all that.
Oh, so it's called The Periodic Family, and it's coming out in, I think, October 14th, mid October, by Cowboy Jamboree Press, The Periodic Family.
Awesome. And we'll
And
be able to find that on your website, I'm assuming.
yes, it'll be on my website, and also it'll be sold on Amazon.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic.
Gail, I have a quick question for you. Do you
Yes.
all ever go to AWP?
You know, I'm on the spectrum and I get sensory overload. So conferences are very challenging for
Oh,
me.
I totally get
I've
that.
been very tempted, and I think if I had enough friends that were going and I really planned it well, I could deal with it. But I think of it and my heart starts to beat a little faster. But yeah, I've heard a lot of, and this one I've heard a lot of people that I talked to, friends said it was really great this year. Did you go?
I didn't go this year.
Oh, you
No, I went last year and I'm planning to go this coming year. But I know plenty of people who go and love it, but everybody who goes says that it makes them stress sometimes. And one person was joking with me that she just goes and hides under a table and reads some poetry when she's stressed. And I also know plenty of people like you who've said it just doesn't seem like it's for them. I totally get that.
It's
Yeah.
just the magnitude of it. I mean, it like the content is thrilling and exciting. I'm like I would be a kid in a candy shop in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe not.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk with you. It's been really fun.
It's been a total joy for me too. And your story in Hodgepodge is called Goat Season. Yes,
Yes, goat season.
Goat Season, issue 5.1. And thank you so much, and best of luck to you, Claudia.